Peter, thank you so much for joining us. We are just delighted to have you here. I know you've spoken in many, many other settings, but we are delighted that this is a first time for you with us on the First Person program. You have so much to share with us, and we only have an hour, so we'll get started right away. You were born in Berlin, Germany in 1929, March 1st, 1929. Hitler and the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933 when you were 4. Your family remained in Berlin till 1936 when they moved to Prague, Czechoslovakia, then to Vienna, Austria in 1937. Tell us what you can about your parents and your life in those years in Berlin and your moves to Prague and Vienna.
I'll be glad to. Thank you very much. Well, my father was actually Viennese and Austrian working in Germany at the time. He was a graduate mechanical engineer working for a company that had offices in several European countries. My mother was occasionally was a phys ed teacher, and basically she was a housewife, as they called them back then, and her number one task was to raise me. I'm an only child, so I was spoiled rotten and got a lot of attention. Enjoyed a upper middle class life. My father had a big Mercedes convertible. Nowadays everybody has a car, but back then that was quite something. And my first year in school in Germany, first grade, I learned from my first reader, which was entitled "The Poisoned Mushroom." On the cover of it is a picture of that mushroom, and everybody in Europe recognizes it as being very poisonous, not to touch it. That mushroom had a Jewish nose, and it had a Star of David, and my teacher was telling me that Jews are very bad people. They lie, they steal, they cheat, they murder, and since my parents were totally secular, I had no idea that this in any way had anything to do with me. I never identified as Jewish. We always celebrated Christmas every year. Christmas is an occasion when Father Christmas comes and brings presents to the children. So I actually was taught to hate Jews. And for reasons that I don't quite understand today, my father was asked to move to Prague, Czechoslovakia, where his company also had an office. I don't know whether that was at his request. In any case, we moved to Czechoslovakia in 1936. To me, this was, of course, a shock, because from one day to the next, I find myself in a school where they speak Czech, and I didn't know a word of that. But I adapted and spent a year in Czechoslovakia, after which my father was transferred to Vienna, his hometown, so he was delighted to go there. And at that point, my mother and my father evidently had a conversation and said, well, we're in Austria. Austria is 39%, Austria is 98%, 98% Catholic. They have a long history and tradition of anti-Semitism. Why don't we have Peter baptized? So at that point, I was baptized in Vienna. I had my first communion there, went to catechism, and for the first time I learned something about religion. And I, from that moment on, of course, identified as a Catholic. I also served as an altar boy. And life was very nice, very pleasant, no problem.
Until the following year, after you moved to Vienna, Germany, when Germany annexed, seized control of Austria in March 1938, which prompted your family to leave Austria for Belgium. Why did they leave Austria so quickly for Belgium? And then what was it like for you and your family once you got to Belgium?
A very good question. On the day of the annexation, the day afterwards, Hitler came to Vienna, and of course I left home. I went down to the Ringstraße, the main street in Austria. I wanted to see Hitler, And when he finally came, I just saw all these boys in Hitler Youth uniforms. I was just dying to join the Hitler Youth. I was 9 years old. With the uniform came a dagger. Boy, nine-year-old sounds great.
Boy, yeah.
Anyhow, I was gone for about 3 hours, and when I came home, my mother said to me, "Where in the heck have you been?" And I said to her proudly, "I saw our Führer." And my mother slapped me left and right and said, "Don't you ever call him ours." I was very confused. I didn't understand. But in a matter of about 2 weeks, we left precipitously Vienna with only one suitcase for my mother, my father, and I. Each had a suitcase. We had some difficulty upon leaving Germany. My father was interrogated on the train. Why are you leaving? And my father kept reassuring them, we are not leaving. We are merely going to Brussels. My company has an office in Belgium, and I thought I'd take my wife along, and my son, and as you can see, we only have one suitcase each. So they finally let us go, and now we arrive in Belgium. Now, there had been rumors already about the possibility of a war coming, and my parents were delighted to be in Belgium because Belgium was a neutral country, and there was nothing to worry about Belgium. If there is a war, we are safe. For me, the shock was, of course, this is 1938, I'm 9 years old, and the big shock was I had to leave behind my toy soldiers, my electric train set. I mean, this was a catastrophe to me. I didn't realize at that time that for my parents, it was far worse. They left behind everything except what they were able to pack in a suitcase. And we suddenly lived in a very small, furnished apartment. All the furniture, all of my parents' belongings were left behind. And the other shock for me was that, again, from one day to the next, I'm finding myself in a school where they speak a foreign language, mostly French, but also in Belgium there's a second official language, Flemish, which is something like Dutch, and I had to learn that as well. But at that age, you learn quickly, and within a matter of 6 months, I was fluent in French, and I had gotten used to living there, and I also understood that one of the reasons my father left so quickly from Austria was that evidently he had incurred the wrath of some of the Nazis when he worked in Germany, because he had been requested to smuggle some aircraft engines from the United States into either Austria or Belgium and then transfer them into Germany as agricultural machinery, which was in violation of the Versailles Treaty that ended the First World War. And I think that my father feared that because of his failure to cooperate with the Nazis at that time, that he might be on a blacklist and that it was safest to leave. So
Peter, they moved to Brussels. It's a neutral country. They feel safe in Belgium. The following September 1939, of course, war broke out with the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany. But the full effect of the war didn't really come to Western Europe until May of 1940, when the Germans invaded what we call the Low Countries, including Belgium. The impact of your family when Germany invaded was almost immediate. Tell us what happened to your parents after the Germans launched their offensive.
Well, on the 10th of May 1940, the Germans attacked Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg, and on that morning, my father decided that he had to go to his office in order to distribute whatever money was due his employees so that they would be able to flee. And on the way to the railway stations, from the office was in Antwerp, and we lived in Brussels. On the way to the railway station, there was an identity check. My father pulled out his German passport, and of course the Belgian police said, we got ourselves a German paratrooper or a fifth columnist, and he was arrested as an enemy. And it took
by the Belgians?
By the Belgian police, yes, by the Belgians. And it took my mother about 3 days to find out where he was being held. We went to visit him. We were allowed to bring him a suitcase and one blanket. And at that point, my father said to my mother, look, take Peter, yourself, and your mother. my mother's mother, was also in Brussels, and get out of here as quickly as possible. You don't want to get caught between two armies. You've got the Nazis coming from the northeast, and you have the French and the British trying to come to aid the Belgians. They're coming from the southwest. You don't want to get caught between the two. So we started with, again, one suitcase each, my grandmother, my mother and I, and started fleeing towards France. It took us about 10 days to get to France. On the way, and you might have seen newsreels about that period, the roads were clogged with hundreds of thousands of refugees. And about every 20 minutes or so, German Stuka dive bombers would machine gun the roads, and we would jump into the ditch each time. And I could only think of one thing. When I grow up, I want to be a pilot and sit in the cockpit of an airplane, and that must be a lot of fun. 1940, I'm 11 years old. I didn't know any better. When a cow dropped dead next to me, death is something that young people don't think of. That's something that happens to very old people. And if you don't believe me, just look at how teenagers drive nowadays, okay? So anyhow, it took us 10 days to get to Paris, where my mother's sister lived, my aunt. We were there for 4 hours. Air raid sirens went off. My mother said, I didn't come to Paris to be bombed here. I could have stayed in Brussels for that. And we managed to get onto a train, got to Bordeaux, which is in the south of France, along the Atlantic coast. And there, my mother's German upbringing, you know, we are very correct, must do everything prescribed by law, went to the French police to register. And the French policeman said, now let me see, you're a German, you're born in Germany, you're married an Austrian, that makes you an Austrian, there is no more Austria, you come from Belgium with your mother and with your son, you don't have a visa, you don't belong here, I don't know what to do with you, go to the gendarmerie, that's the national police. So we went to the gendarmerie, same thing there. He said, go to the prefecture, which is sort of a county government administration. And the other man said, madame, I know exactly what you have to do. You're going to take a train and go to a place called Oloron-Sainte-Marie. We have experts. They know just what to do with you. So we took the train. We got there. Upon arrival, the train was surrounded by French gendarmes with machine guns. They loaded us onto an open truck, and 20 minutes later, they dumped us into a French concentration camp called Gurs. Gurs was a camp with a capacity of 14,000 human beings. It had been constructed about 2 or 3 years earlier, primarily to detain refugees from the Spanish Civil War. But we were, as far as the French were concerned, we were enemy aliens. And we lived in barracks, 60 people to a barracks, no beds or anything. You slept on the floor, straw simply strewn on the floor. There were no hygienic facilities within the barracks. There was only one cold water spigot outside. The toilets, called latrines, were located about 150 yards or so away. In order to get there, you had a muddy path to go to, and they were just open trenches. We are now at the mid to late May 1940. It's almost summertime in the south of France. It's hot. France is famous for making perfume. That ain't the place where they made it. Food was practically non-existent. Breakfast, a lukewarm, dark liquid called coffee, and one slice of bread. Lunch, another lukewarm liquid. If you found a carrot slice or two, you hit the jackpot, and you got another slice of bread. And dinner was pretty much a repeat of what lunch was. We were all hungry. Even though there were no beds, we had bed bugs, we had lice, body lice, fleas. It was hell. And my mother, who had been made barracks chief, just couldn't wait to get out of here.
And tell us why your mother was made barracks chief.
She basically was made barracks chief because she had been a phys ed teacher. She was physically a strong person. Mm-hmm. She was articulate and spoke French fluently. And the barracks chiefs were given a briefing from the camp commander about once a week or so to tell them what is going on in the outside world, from which we were totally separated. We had no idea. We got no newspapers, there was no radio, obviously no television, and the only news that we had about what was going on in the outside world was from new prisoners that were coming in, and that was a rumor mill. Everyone had his own interpretation of what is happening in the rest of the world. Finally, on the 22nd of June, France surrendered to the Nazis, signed an armistice, and a few days later, my mother learned that a German army inspection team was coming to Gurs. So she decided, if it's the army, then it's not the Gestapo and it's not the secret police. I'm going to try to get out of here. So she took me at the entrance of the camp, and as soon as the German officer arrived, she rushed forwards toward him with her passport, her German passport in her hand, yelling as loud as she could, "Heil Hitler, I am a citizen of the great German the German Third Reich. I demand to be released immediately from this stinking hellhole where these lousy, no-good Frenchmen have been holding me, my son, and my mother." And the German officer looked at her passport, turned to the French camp commander and said, "You call taxi for madame. You pay taxi. Madame taxi takes madame wherever she wants to go." And 20 minutes later, we're in a taxi. "Where to, madame?" My mother said, "Take us to Spain." He says, "Spain? Impossible." "Why?" "The Spaniards don't allow anybody into Spain, and the Germans and the French don't allow anyone out of France." "Where can you take us?" "I can take you north. Start driving." So we are driving for several hours. We come to a large town in France called Toulouse. And at that point, my grandmother said to my mother, "Look, your sister," in other words, my aunt, had managed to get to Toulouse. I don't know how my grandmother found that out. Anyhow, she said, "You've got your hands full with Peter. Good luck. I'm leaving you here now." And we continued driving until we came to a town called Auch. And there people waved the cab to stop. They told us, "Don't go beyond here. The Germans are on the other side." My mother saw a large red brick building. She knocked on the door, and it turned out it was a convent. The sister that opened the door, my mother explained her situation, and she said, "We will help you. Come in." And they put my mother in touch with a food distribution center that was in the center of Auch. It was operated jointly by the Swiss Red Cross and American Quakers. It has nothing to do with Quaker Oats. Quakers is a religious denomination, and they do some incredibly good work far beyond their numbers. Anyhow, they decided to give my mother a temporary job. With a temporary job in hand, she could go to the police, register, and get permission to reside in Auch, which, with that permission, she was able to get a one-room, and I mean it was one-room apartment.
For the two of you.
For just my mother and I. And
Peter, did you, at that time, up till that point, did your mother know anything about your father's status?
No, at that point she did not know. We had no idea what happened to my father. Again, rumor mills. As we left Belgium, the rumor was that the men who had been arrested were being sent to Cayenne. Cayenne is the Devil's Island, where it was a French penal colony off the coast of South America, and everybody was horrified at the thought because there were terrible tales about no one ever comes back from Cayenne. Later on, it turned out it wasn't Cayenne, it was Caen, which sounds like Cayenne, but anyhow, it took my mother a good 2-3 months until she discovered that my father had been sent from Belgium, first to a camp in Saint-Cyprien on the Mediterranean coast. Saint-Cyprien was destroyed in October that year in a storm, and the men from there were ultimately transferred to Gurs also. And my mother was able to go and visit him in Gurs. Finally, in the spring of 1941, in March of 1941, my father was released on a temporary convalescence leave. My father was 16 years older than my mother. He had developed heart trouble during the time that he spent in the camps, and I think the camp commander felt that he probably wouldn't live for another 30 days, so why pay for the burial? My mother succeeded in nursing him back to health and get the leave renewed every 30 days. At least we were together. But under the Vichy laws, Vichy was the southern part of France, which was governed by a collaborating French government, collaborating with the northern part of France, which was occupied by the Germans. The Vichy laws restricting the activities of Jews were even more rigorous and more restrictive than the Nuremberg laws, which restricted the comings and goings of Jews in Germany. So my father was prohibited from doing any work whatsoever. He did some work undercover, tried to make a few pennies here and there, which was difficult, but we managed to
in fact, you stayed together in Austria
Yes.
until July 1942, when you were sent to a summer camp run by the Quakers.
Yes.
And while you were at the summer camp, your parents were arrested in late August 1942 and deported to Auschwitz. And although you didn't know where they had been sent, the news of your parents' arrest prompted you to start your first diary.
Yes.
With your parents gone, where did you go from the summer camp, and what did you know about your parents at that time?
Well, the lady in charge of the summer camp was a devout Catholic lady who took me to 7 o'clock Mass just about every morning. And she announced to me that my parents had been arrested the day before, on the 26th of August, and she told me this on the 27th of August. They were to be going to an unknown destination. There had been rumors that the Jews were being sent east for, quote, resettlement. No one really quite knew what that meant. It didn't sound good. So she then proceeded to notify the Quakers that she had a Jewish child on her hand, especially 2 days later when the gendarmes came to arrest me. And she told the Quakers, look, you've got to take this kid off my hand. The gendarmes are going to come back and arrest him. So the Quakers said, you're in luck. We've gotten permission from the Vichy government to send 500 orphans to America, and the Americans have agreed to take them in. And so have Pierre, I was called Pierre then, Pierre fill out these forms, and I filled out the forms, name, place of birth, date of birth, religion. And I put down Catholic. And about 3 days later, Mrs. Cavaillon, the lady in charge, got a letter from the Quakers saying, you don't understand, we're trying to save some Jewish children. So Mrs. Cavaillon wrote back, and by the way, this is all documented. We have been able to find this in archives. She wrote back 4 pages, no, you don't understand. When the gendarmes come to arrest him here, and I show them his baptismal certificate, they say it's garbage. As far as Vichy is concerned, this child is Jewish. Please reconsider. The Quakers did reconsider. The ship was supposed to leave in late November.
Before we turn
Yes.
to that, if I can, you started your first entry in your diary on August 27th, 1942. Right. What prompted you to start that diary?
Okay, the reason I started the diary was that with the arrest of my parents, my world came to an end. My parents were everything for me. As I said, I was an only child. I had no other relatives anywhere in France. I was concerned what is going to happen to me, who's going to take care of me. I'm only 13 and a half years old. And on top of that, Mrs. Cavaillon reassured me that I had nothing to worry about. She was going to organize a novena, and that's 9 days of rosary prayers. And at the end of the novena, your parents will be restored to you. So I just wanted them to know that on a day-to-day basis, what I was doing, that I was doing everything that they would have expected of me. And at the end of 9 days, my parents weren't there, and I asked, where are they? And well, be patient. We did get a postcard from them from a transit camp indicating that they were on their way to an unknown destination and begging Mrs. Cavaillon to please take care of me. Obviously, they must have had a premonition that they may not come back. And Mrs. Cavaillon did everything in her power to save me. In November, or early in November, she took her 4-year-old daughter, a beautiful little girl with blue eyes and curly blonde hair, and she said, with my daughter in tow, we are less likely to be stopped by the police for interrogation. We look more like a family. And she brought me down to Marseille, from where the ship to America was supposed to leave.
One more interruption. May I take the liberty of just reading a little something from your diary?
Please.
As you said, you knew your parents were arrested. You didn't know where they were. You did get a postcard from them. On the 29th, you wrote, "The mailman was here. I run to ask if there is something for me. Praise the Lord. A postcard from you telling me that you are together at the Camp du Vernet." You received one more card from them, I believe, on August 31st. But from that point forward, the rest of your diary is very painful to read. Almost daily, you just wrote things like, "Nothing from you," September 7th, "Still nothing," September 11th. And the next day you wrote, "I cried today. Who knows where you were taken to?" And it goes from there. And you would not see that diary for another 40 years. Do you recall what it was like to write those entries?
Honestly, no, not today. But as the diary reflects, and as I mentioned, my parents were everything. And I missed them terribly. And I constantly reflected it in my diary when I was desperately waiting for a word to find out where are they, what is happening to them, will I see them again, and that's quite evident in the diary entries.
Sure is.
Yeah.
So Peter, I interrupted you. Here you are thinking you're going to leave for the United States in November 1942.
So I arrive in Marseille on the 6th of November, turned over to the Quakers by Mrs. Cavaillon, told that the ship would leave around the 24th, 27th of November. On the 10th of November, the Allies, at that time primarily the British, the Americans, some Australians and New Zealanders, without consulting me, I might add, decided to land in North Africa. And that was the pretext which the Nazis used to go ahead and occupy the so-called free or unoccupied zone of France. And the very first thing that they did is block all ship traffic in and out of Marseille. And in my diary, I said, "Goodbye, America." I came to the realization that I'm not going to be leaving here on the 26th or the 27th.
You were literally almost on the wharf.
Right. So it was another shock. And I was then bounced, more or less, from one orphanage to another. The Quakers had to shut down their operation in Marseille at that time. And I didn't know what was going to happen to me. Ultimately, in January, rumors began to circulate in Marseille that the Germans and the French were about to round up all the Jews in the area. And so I was told to get ready to leave on a moment's notice. And ultimately, I was given a railroad ticket and specific instructions on where to change trains and so forth. And as I indicated in my diary, I arrived in a place called Le Chambon-sur-Lignon at 1 o'clock in the morning on a very cold day in January. I think it was January the 15th or 16th, where I was met by a young man, Daniel Trocmé. He was there on a bicycle, and we hiked for about 2 hours or so before we got to his home, and I had no idea where I was. I was dead tired by then, fell asleep, and the next morning I learned that I found myself in the village of Le Chambon.
And before you tell us about that, there's one thing you shared with me that I think took place before you went to Lycia Bone. After the Germans occupied the southern zone, a Wehrmacht, a German army camp, was created near you, and you went to that camp.
Well, that's a story I don't really like to talk about. And I did some pretty foolish things.
I think you should share this one.
So what happened there is that in one of these orphanages, all the other kids were Spaniards, children from refugees from the Spanish Civil War. And we had very little food. We were obsessed with eating. And the farm across the street from where I was requisitioned by a detachment of Waffen-SS with armored personnel carriers and so forth. And they were having a ball. They were singing, and I could hear music, and they were eating. So what the heck, I speak German. I went over there, and I started to talk to them. And they invited me to have spaghetti and meatball with them, and I got chocolate from them, and it was wonderful. And finally, one of them said to me, "What's a nice German boy doing here in France at this time?" And I said, "Shh, don't tell anybody. My father is in the Gestapo and the secret police." "Ach so. But how come?" I said, "Well, my father has been here, and I have been here now since before the war. I speak French fluently. I go to school, and I report to my father everything that my classmates are telling me about what their parents are talking about, and that helps my father in his work." And they said, "Oh, very good, yeah." So, but the director of the home had seen me go over there, and when I came back, he read the riot act to me and said, "You're getting out of here. I don't want you here anymore." I begged him not to send me away. Anyhow, it's all described in my diary. He sent me away. About a week or 10 days later, he took me back again because I begged him to please take me back. But as I said, I did some pretty stupid things at the time. Somehow, I got away with it. I don't know. I was lucky. Maybe I learned from my mother the way she bluffed her way out of guilt. I found a story that was intimidating to the other Germans. Okay, everybody was afraid of the Gestapo, the secret police.
So you ended up at Le Chambon, and that is a remarkable place.
Le Chambon is unique in the annals of the Second World War. It's on a plateau at an elevation of about 3,000 feet, very windswept, very cold. The land is not very fertile, but the area was populated back in the 16th century when Catholics in France were killing off Protestants. There was an infamous massacre of St. Bartholomew when in one night some 10,000 Protestants were slaughtered in Paris. These refugees, these Protestant refugees, are known as Huguenots. They were able to settle on that plateau and survived. Many of them are fundamentalist Christians. They believe what the Bible says. There's a movie made about them. Anyhow, it's in Le Chambon, in the surrounding area. They saved some 5,000 refugees, among them some 3,500 Jews. And there was a movie made about this called Weapons of the Spirit, which is the words that the pastor of the village, André Trocmé, used on the day France surrendered to the Nazis. He said, "Now is the time to fight the enemy with the weapons of the Spirit." And the villagers understood what that meant. And I had the fortune of having a small role in that movie, Weapons of the Spirit. There's a scene which I find especially touching. An elderly woman is shuffling towards what they call their temple, her church, and she's clutching a book in the crook of her arm. And the film director asked her, "Tell me, madame, why did you do this? You could have sold your food on the black market and enriched yourself. What you were doing was punishable by immediate arrest. You could have been killed for it." She says, "It's in the book. It says here, if someone is sick, you go to their bedside, you bring them cheer. If someone is hungry, you ask them to table and you share what food you have. If someone needs shelter, you open your door and you provide shelter. So these good people did actually put into action what the good book told them to do. They didn't just talk about it. The village was named, there's an organization in Israel called Yad Vashem that has sought out non-Jews who helped hide and protect Jews during the war, and the entire village and surrounding area was named just among nations by Yad Vashem. So
soon after you got to Lycia Bone, your diary stops abruptly. What happened?
What happened was that the man in charge, the man who had met me at the railway station, Daniel Trocme, the nephew of the pastor, saw me writing in the book, and he said, "What is this?" And he looked at it, and when he realized that it contained dates, names, addresses, and so forth, he confiscated it, because had it fallen into the hands of either the French police or the Nazis, this would have been compromising for a lot of people. So my diary disappeared, and for many, many years it was gone. I began to doubt whether I had even written it. I did start a second diary
but not
subsequently,
for quite a while.
not until many months later.
Many months later, on September 1943, and I know we're skipping over a great deal, you were sent to yet another place to be hidden. This time it's a boarding school in Figeac, and you remained there, I think, from September 43 till your escape to Switzerland in May of 1944. That's where you resumed your started your second diary. Tell us about your time in Figeac and the preparations that were made for you to escape.
Well, I got to Figeac because in Le Chambon, in order to make room for more people that they might save, they took those of us who spoke French fluently and who might pass by providing us with false identities. I was given a false name. I became Pierre Fesson instead of Peter Feigl, supposedly born in Auch. And with that false identity, I, together with 4 other boys...
Interrupting for a moment.
Yeah.
But you kept your real birthday.
Yes, we kept this was done so that if someone suddenly asks, "What's your birthday?" you don't stammer. You know that. All we had to do is memorize, make sure that, "What's your name?" You don't come up, no. So you had to absolutely be sure to come up with the right false name at that time. And we were trained to do that. So with that, we were sent to a school in Figeac, France, which was a high school. And of course, we were boarding students since we couldn't go home in the evening. And in Figeac, basically, again, there had to have been someone. I've always wondered, 2 of the 5 of us, 2 of them had a Jewish accent, and I realized that there must have been someone in that school who realized that we weren't what we were advertised to be. We weren't native Frenchmen. Mm-hmm. As I found out many, many years later, it was the principal in that school. So here is someone who knew and who, at personal risk, also did the right thing and protected us. But in May of 1944, first of all, on the 1st of January, I began to write my second diary at that point, and I, again, recorded on a daily basis what I was doing. Some of us kids were doing things that could have got us into trouble, but sort of a form of resistance. The little sugar we could find, we poured into the gas tanks of German army trucks that were parked in the schoolyard. That gums up the engines, and then when the Germans try to go somewhere, they don't go very far, the engine stops. We punctured their tires or cut their tires to let the air out. Activities which could have gotten us in jail, no question about it. But we were kids, 14, 15. It was a game. It was an adventure for us, okay? And anyhow, in May...
A couple of comments about your second diary that
Yes.
started there. In the second diary, you aren't really talking much about your parents. What did you think or know at that point?
Well, I didn't know for sure, but again, by then rumors were circulating that there were people who were being shipped east, that meant to Poland somewhere, and that Jews were being killed there. But there was no proof of this. Mm-hmm. But on the one hand, I kept hoping. On the other hand, there were these stories, and I didn't know. I was praying, I was hoping at the time still, and but life had to go on. Mm-hmm. And in May of on the 20th, I think it was the 20th of May, 44. I'm now 15. A SS detachment, Das Reich, came into Figeac and ordered all the males between the ages of 16 and 54 to report to the town hall for assignment to a labor detachment. Well, I've gotten a little bit smarter by then, and I decided I better lay low. I was still an altar boy in the church that was adjacent to the school. I found my way in there and climbed into the bell tower, belfry, and I hid up in the bell tower from where I could look down in the distance, see the town square. I spent about 24 hours there. And when I saw the trucks leaving the following morning with all the men that had reported there, I came down and I discovered that the other 4 boys that had come with me from Le Chambon, they were gone. So evidently they were part of that group. Many, many years later, I discovered that one of the other one did manage to come back to the States. He survived. Why? Because he was in the hospital on that day having his appendix removed. That's how he escaped. The other 3, unfortunately, wound up in Auschwitz. So I was lucky I escaped. At that point, I was contacted by some underground Jewish Boy Scouts, and they told me that it was too dangerous for me to remain there. I had to get ready to leave on a moment's notice again. Ultimately, with only a backpack with me, I was given directions again to take a train to get off at a railway station called Viry. I didn't even know it was near the Swiss border. They hadn't told me yet. I was told that at that station I would be contacted by people, which they did. There were 2 passeurs. Those are, nowadays they call them coyotes. They are people who, for money, knowing the area, help people, guide them to the border, and give them instructions on when to cross, how to cross, and so forth. I was part of a group of some 20 kids who were led to the border. It's all described in my diary.
It's the longest entry in your diary.
Yes. It was, for instance, once I was on the Swiss side, I immediately sketched the layout of the land, that there were 2 rows of barbed wire fences. The first one was on French territory, then there was a no man's land between it and the next barbed wire fence, which was on Swiss land, and sort of no man's land is an open firing range. Anyone caught in that no man's land can be shot, certainly by the French or the Germans. So I described the crossing, the weather conditions, how the passeurs were very upset because a child began to scream and they were worried that it would alert the guards. But finally, at the given sign, I went over the first barbed wire fence. In my backpack, I had some 50 photographs that I had smuggled out of Le Chambon, which I should never have done. Some of those photographs, in fact, all of those photographs, I've donated to the museum. Some of those you can find on the 2nd floor here. And managed to get into Switzerland. Once I was there, I was arrested by the Swiss, of course, as an illegal immigrant. I was sent to a triage center outside of Geneva, where they more or less decided what they were going to do with the illegals. On the way to be interrogated, I was told by someone who sort of whispered in my ear, be careful, they are sending the Jews right back into Switzerland. And at that point, I was interrogated. I have a copy of the interrogation report. Again, just about everything in my diary is documented. And at a certain point, I pulled out of the lining of my jacket. Someone had sewn my baptismal certificate into the lining. I pulled out my baptismal certificate. Ah, mais tu es catholique, bienvenue en Suisse. You're a Catholic, welcome in Switzerland. And for me, I write in my diary, I sleep in a free country. I now was in Switzerland. For me, basically, the war ended 2 weeks before the Normandy landings. So,
and in that entry, in then I sleep soundly in a free country, is almost your last entry in the diary. Do you recall that sense of relief and freedom?
Yes, there was a tremendous amount of relief, especially so after, the Swiss authorities decided that I could stay. My father had given me the name of a business associate of his in Switzerland. I gave that name to the Swiss authorities. They contacted that family, and that family then, a few days later, agreed to take me in. They didn't have any children, and so I really felt comforted. At least I have someone to look after me, to take care of me, and I spent a year in that family. By that time, I was a difficult child, let's put it that way. And after a year, they said to the Red Cross, please take this kid off our hands, we've had enough of him. So, and I was then bounced from one place to another. Ultimately, well, first of all, by 1945, when the Soviets came across Auschwitz, that was the first death camp to be, quote, liberated by them. In Switzerland, with a free press, for the first time appeared photographs taken of Auschwitz and articles about the camp. And of course, that is when I had the first realization that I had to confront and say, undoubtedly, my parents must have wound up there. And by shortly after the war, May or June of 1945, I was contacted by the Red Cross. My grandmother, my uncle, and my aunt in America, the grandmother who had fled from Belgium with me. And
the one who stayed with her,
yes,
the aunt
right.
Toulouse.
Yes. They were all looking for me. And so then they proceeded to try to obtain a visa to come to the United States. And ultimately, in July of 1946, I succeeded in getting a visa and a ship to come to America, and I came here. So.
And the rest is history, as they say. You joined the Air Force.
The rest is history. I joined the Air Force. I joined the Air Force, honestly, mostly because I had to get away from my grandmother. The last time she saw me, I was 11. I am now 17 and a half, and I am told, I want you in bed at 9:30. I don't want you to go to Central Park. She lived in New York. I don't want you to go out with American girls. They have intentions. I was looking for those girls. Anyhow, I had to get away from her. So the best thing was to join the Air Force.
And you did a remarkable thing in the Air Force, dealing with captured German documents, went on to quite an incredible career. There's so much more you could tell us, Peter. I think with the few minutes we have left, should we entertain just a couple of questions from our audience?
By all means.
Okay, because there's so many more I'd love to ask you, but why don't we do that? We have a few minutes for just a couple of questions. We ask that if you have a question, you go to one of the two microphones in each aisle, if you would. That way, everybody in the room, including us, will hear the question. I'll repeat it as best I can, and then Peter will respond to it. So anybody have a question? And if not, I'll continue for the few minutes we have left.
Go ahead. I don't bite.
Oh, here we have one coming up.
Here we have someone.
Okay.
Very good. Hi.
Thank you very much for speaking to us today. I go to college at the University of Arkansas, and several researchers there who I've taken classes from have spoken about Holocaust research. And right now, there's sort of this thing happening where there's a conspiracy theory that the Holocaust didn't really happen. What do you have to say to those people who are perpetuating this?
Peter, what do you have to say to people who deny that the Holocaust occurred?
Well, there are many answers to this, but the answer that I like best of all for me is that there are some 85 million German citizens nowadays, and they have been paying restitution since the 1950s, and they're being taxed for this annually. And they are spending a lot of money in maintaining the death camps for the world to see what happened. They have monuments, they have reminders all over Germany if you travel. In the middle of Berlin, you come out of the subway station, there's a big sign, places never to be forgotten, with a list of all of the concentration camps and the death camps. So why on earth would they be doing this? We Americans are all taxpayers. We all complain about that. I guarantee you, if there were some way of denying it, they would have done so and would have stopped contributing.
Thank you. One more time for one more question. Yes, sir.
First, thank you for your service. And my question was, you went over like the book that you read as a kid, the Poisonous Mushroom, about how like it was against Jewish people. That was a little bit less segregation, but did you experience segregation in the European areas or see any that was kind of like what African Americans experienced and Mexicans in the United States during the Civil War period, or not Civil War, Civil Rights period?
So did you experience personally anti-Semitism and segregation, or your parents?
Yeah. A very good question. And honestly, I never experienced it because, first of all, until I was baptized, I didn't know about religion, and whatever, my parents didn't practice anything about Judaism. Jews usually have on their door a menorah, a mezuzah. You see, I don't know. And we never had this. Many Jews keep menorahs, candelabras, and so on. There was absolutely nothing to indicate to me that I had anything to do with this. And once I was baptized, of course, as I said, when I was asked to fill out the document about coming to America, my religion was Catholic. So I never had that experience. And I don't look particularly Jewish. I don't speak with a Jewish accent. So fortunately for me, I never had to be called the dirty Jew or whatever. So,
however, you were hunted by the French police,
yes.
And you know that if you had been found, you would have been
yes.
treated very harshly.
Of course, because they consider this a matter of race rather than a question of religion or belief. So,
Peter, we are at the end, but I'm going to take the liberty of thank you very much, and I think we're going to stop there. I just have to ask you how you got the short version of how you got that diary back that was confiscated 40-some years later.
All kinds of weird coincidences. Okay, so we have to move up to about 1980, 81, 82. I had a consulting company at the time. We had a contract with the Algerian government. It was a 6-year contract. In the last year of the contract, we were being sued by the Algerians. I needed an attorney. I went to my attorney here in Washington, Clark Clifford. Some of you may have heard of the name. Clark said, go to Paris, talk to a man named Samuel Pizarre. He's an international attorney. I went to see him. I told him about the problem. He said, gee, you speak French very well. Where did you learn your French? I said, well, I learned it in Belgium and then in France. Where in France? Oh, I was in Arches and Le Chambon-sur-Lignon. Yes. He said, oh, I have a cousin in Hollywood. He's a film producer. Do you mind if I give him your name? I said, no, not at all. So he got in touch with me. He asked me to come to Le Chambon while he's filming his documentary. When the documentary was shown finally in 1987 in movie theaters in France, shortly thereafter I received a letter from a man in Paris. Are you the Peter Feigl who wrote a diary dedicated to his parents? I suspected a scam at first. I went to see the man in Paris. Sure enough, he has my diary. Where did you get my diary? Well, I'm a collector of such memorabilia. I bought it on the flea market in France, sometime 3 or 4 years after the war, on the Côte d'Azur. And I thought that you had died or that you had been killed. And by the way, I published your diary in France back in 1980, 84 or 85. So I wanted my diary back. Well, he said, I'm a poor man, and I had to buy it on the flea market. I had to pay him $265, but I finally did get my diary back. But that's how I got it back.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to... We're going to close our program in just a moment. I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. Remind you that we will have programs each Wednesday and Thursday until the 8th of August. All of our programs will be available on the museum's YouTube channel. I'm going to turn to Peter in just a moment to close our program. When he's finished, he's going to exit the stage, go up to the entrance, and there he will be available to sign copies of Alexandra Zapruder's book, Salvage Pages, which includes Peter's complete diaries, and they really are remarkable reading, along with the diaries of other young people from the Holocaust. It's our tradition at First Person that our first person gets the last word. And so with that, I'd like to turn back to Peter to close our program. When he finishes, before he exits the stage, our photographer Lolita is going to come up on the stage and take a photograph of Peter with you as the background. So we ask that you stay with us until that photo is taken, if you don't mind. Peter?
Thank you, Bill. I've spoken to many high schools, universities, and many groups. And frequently the question arises, what relevance does my story have to you, to the audience? And my answer to that is, especially in schools, in high schools, I tell them, look, hatred is something that you have to learn. I was taught to hate Jews, in fact, and I hated Jews, not knowing any better. And this business of hating mostly minorities is something that unfortunately is too much of it going on in the world. Normally, it is something that is exploited by dictators. And what happens is that in Germany, you had a situation after the First World War with very high unemployment, political parties fighting with one another, street fights, hyperinflation. Finally, someone emerges and says, I am the savior of the nation. I'm going to make Germany respected again. Just follow me, and you know all the problems that we have. I need a scapegoat. The Jews. Now, the Jews represented less than 1% of the total population of Germany. So it was, if you're a bully, you don't pick on somebody bigger than you are, you pick on a little guy. The big guy might punch you. So there is in this room no one in the school, no one who has not either been bullied by somebody, was the bully, or has witnessed bullying. And I am here to tell you that the next time you see this happening, it behooves you to stop it right then and there. Why? I'll give you 2 reasons. The first reason is because it is the right thing to do. And everybody, no matter what your background, you know damn well you know right from wrong. But if that isn't enough reason, I will give you a second reason, and that's called self-preservation. You never know. There may be a time coming where you belong into a minority, whether that's people with red hair or freckles, or someone with dark skin, or some people with a foreign accent who are in the minority, who are the scapegoats. And that is the other reason why you have to stop it, because otherwise you may be the one who is part of that minority. So when it happens, stop it.